I mentioned earlier, one of our goals is to introduce some ways of thinking about properties. So Andrea's talked about ways to think about the sustainability or the green aspects of your land, and those calculators are really a lot of fun. So what I enjoyed is you can change some of the assumptions and go back and recalculate. Oh, if I did this, what would happen? So I do encourage you to play around with some of those. But we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about thinking about the historic aspects of historic property and what does that assessment and evaluation look like. So when we talk about what is a historic property, it's not just that it's 50 years or older. It has to have more than that. Many people are aware of the significance of a historic property if it's associated with a significant historic event or the lives of a person that's important in our history or distinctive characteristics or archaeology. But in addition to that, there also needs to be what's known as historic integrity. And integrity is the assessment on whether there is something left to preserve. Is there enough character that actually conveys the importance or conveys the significance of the property? So those aspects of integrity are broken down into 7 different aspects of integrity, and they go from tangible to intangible. So you can think about things like the material. If it was built out of brick, is it still built out of brick, or has it changed to aluminum siding? So that's an aspect of material integrity. Design, is the original or historic design still visible? Is it still in place? The workmanship, this is the craftsmanship or the skill of the people that put it together. Is that evident in some way? The location, such as has it moved? If it's a home that's been relocated, then it may still have material or design or craftsmanship integrity, but it wouldn't have integrity of location. Also, setting, which is what's going on around it, and association, which is the relationship between the place and the people or events that made it historic in the first place, as well as the feeling you get when you're there. So feeling, association, setting, those are a little harder to judge than design, material, location, which are pretty clear-cut. But really, we want to see a historic property have most, if not all, of these aspects of integrity. So you can be thinking about that when you're looking at a historic property as well. The other really important aspect of analyzing a historic property is to be as specific as you can be on defining what makes its character. So here's 2 examples of single-family residential homes on the Big Island. One's in Hilo and one's in Volcano. They're both single stories. They're both about the same size, and yet they're extremely different. So what makes them distinct? What makes them unique in and of themselves? That's character. They're both wood. They both have pitched roofs, and yet you would never say that these were the same home. They're quite distinguished. And so when we start to say, well, why? What is it that makes them different? You're really getting into defining the character of a place. Here's another example from interior spaces. So not just the exterior, what you see from the outside, but inside as well. And the relationship between the inside and the outside, especially in Hawaii, is very evident in many properties. So we break down these character-defining features in a couple of ways. How do you identify them? The first is from a distance. So not way up close, but understand the features of the site or the landscape from afar. So looking at the setting, the site or the yard, the overall shape, the roof shape, which is often very distinguished. Openings for windows and doorways, different types of projections or recesses, major exterior materials, which can include patterns and color, and trim and secondary features can also be really important. So here's an example of that. So setting in Ewa Plantation Villages on Oahu. This is a very distinguished historic district where you can see the rhythm of the houses. They all have a similar setback. You have a street grid. You've got the large trees. You have a similar scale and pattern. And it's that collective experience of the setting that really contributes to what you experience in Ewa. The site can often have some really important water features or yard work or different built as well as natural environments. So looking at the trees, looking at the relationship between the botanical and the built features. The shape, this example in Nu'uanu is basically a square, but it's a shape that can be described, right? The roof or the roof features, this example is on Palm Circle on Oahu at Fort Shafter, but it's got 2 stories, but the upper story is smaller, it's set in, it's got its own roof lines, so the roof becomes very distinguished. This Kaimuki house has these wonderful doors that open and almost like a veranda almost, it's very French looking. And Shangri-La is an example of some recesses and some openings and some roof turrets and some rooftop terraces. So all of these are some features that you would see from a distance. And as you go through a property, you can look at from the top down and from the outside in and from a distance getting closer and start to describe what you're seeing. Exterior materials also become part of that. Whether it's a change of material from brick to wood or concrete to stucco, or it could all be the same. But then really look at this trim and the secondary features as well, because that little detail can really add a lot of punch or a lot of interest to a place. The second step is to move closer. Get closer to the property, closer to the building, to see that craftsmanship, see the finishes, see that detailing that really can tell the story. So often those are material changes or the workmanship is very evident. This is an example of a brick building. It was built in New Jersey in the 1700s. If you just described it as brick, you would lose the expression of the different courses or the different colors, and some are on edge and some are on their sides. There's this change of pattern that you can see both up close and from a distance. And if you just said, hey, that's brick, you wouldn't notice any of those other kinds of detailing. But it doesn't have to be as elaborate as this either. The example at Fort Kamehameha on Pearl Harbor, Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, now it used to be Wheeler Air Force Base, is much simpler. But you can see the relationship in the siding and in the post and pier, and those details also come through as being very much part of the pattern, part of the character. And then step 3, don't forget the inside. As you move from the outside to the inside, go through the building, look at the different spaces, and both individually and how they relate to each other. So the interior features may be built in. You aren't really looking so much at furniture, which can change, but the built-in features. And are there distinctive spaces? This example in Aina Haina really shows that relationship between inside and outside, and very much the views that are being framed by the house are part of that feature. And then the other house, which is another mid-century modern one in Kahala, is really interesting not only in the individual spaces but in how they relate to each other. This one is built without interior walls. All the walls are on the outside, and it's around a courtyard. And so going from the living room to the kitchen, you go out onto an outdoor lanai and just kind of walk over there. This family has a dog that was really confused by this. He didn't know how to guard the house. But that relationship between the different spaces is as important as the spaces themselves. So when you start to analyze what is the feature, what is the character, how do they relate to each other, be aware of them not just as little boxes, but as a relationship and spatial orientation as well. This is getting, again, closer in, looking at things like the tile work, the built-ins. If there's some exposed structure, especially in lofts, or if you have exposed roof beams, exposed ductwork, that can be very much a part of the character of a place as well. You're going to hear more about these wonderful dragon tiles in a minute. So that's going to bring us to a case study, but the idea on character defining features is really to understand a place so that you can respect it enough to take care of it. And so understanding is usually the first step in that process.